Hey, good morning, fellas. It is day 25 of the Warriors Redemption Beta Program. Glad to have you back. We're continuing on with the theme this week of being worthy of redemption. So we've been reflecting a lot about mercy. Remember that mercy is that type of love that we receive in our place of depravity, that place where we feel most unloved. And when we can receive that mercy in those places, it actually transforms those places. They're no longer places of pain and sorrow, but they're places of a deep, intimate, abiding love. And once we can assign new meaning to those traumas in our past or those events in our past where perhaps we've been the villain even in the story in the past, and we can assign new meaning there, it actually has a very transformative effect on our lives. We can actually step into that role of being that redeemed warrior, right? That redeemed warrior that's capable of moving on and persisting toward that super unknown goal and living and existing in the great places of the super unknown here, fellas. And so how do we maximize our capacity to receive mercy? Certainly we went through our exercise yesterday of learning how to do that daily examination, reflect on the times in our lives where we've done great things, but also where we've fallen short. Remember, we've missed the mark, right? That mark being the best version of ourselves and living out as the best, our lives as the best version of ourselves. And settling for good versus the great, or certainly bad for the good. But we go through that examination, we identify those areas in our lives where we have that depravity, and then we can rejoice in that because it's another opportunity to receive that transformative, merciful love. And so how do we continue to expand our ability to receive this merciful love? Well, we can do it by actually participating and being the hands of this merciful love ourselves. And this comes through the skill of forgiveness. And forgiveness can be a tough one here, fellas, because I don't know, there just seems to be this tendency, this human tendency that it's a benefit to us to be able to hold a grudge. And I don't necessarily know where that comes from. Perhaps it comes from pride, but the reality of it doesn't serve us. Ultimately, it doesn't help us. What unforgiveness does is it actually holds us in a place of perpetual victimhood. And remember, we talked about it yesterday. The victim is the person in the story that never changes. They never grow. And if we're never going to grow, we're never going to achieve our super unknown goals here, fellas. We're just going to settle. We're going to be stuck where we're at. So if we want to move forward with our lives, we have to be able to come to grips with this concept of forgiveness. And it's not an easy one. And it's often misunderstood. A lot of times people think that forgiveness means that we have to forget about what has been done to us in the past and just erase it, right? And then we got to be best friends with the person. Well, actually, none of those things are true, right? In fact, we have to acknowledge what has been done to us in order to forgive. It's actually a necessary part of the forgiveness process. And forgiveness certainly is a process. Some people got that gift to be able to just, like forgive and forget and move on, but sometimes it's tough here, fellas. There's a lot of emotion that's kind of fixes us in that place. And this is actually a part of the cycle, the process of forgiveness here. Not the cycle, but the process of forgiveness is allowing ourselves to feel that emotion of anger or perhaps even betrayal and really acknowledge the hurt. If we can't acknowledge the hurt, then there's no need to forgive. But to the extent that we can acknowledge the hurt, we can really acknowledge the gift that we're giving somebody in the forgiveness that we're extending and participating in that merciful love, right? That heart that gives itself to those in misery. And we start to recognize through this process here, which often entails putting ourselves in the shoes of our perpetrators and taking a look at things from their perspective, it starts to increase our capacity to be compassionate in these circumstances here. And it grows our ability to extend that merciful love, be that heart that gives itself to that person in misery. And remember, as the passage says in Scripture, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And what do we want here, fellas? We want as much as that mercy as possible, because that is what is going to transform us. So we're no longer anchored by the things of our past, by the traumas of our past, but we're actually able to receive that love, become the heroes in our own story that persist and pursues that super unknown goal. I've been emailing a little bit with Dr. Edward Tick. Me mentioning him does not mean that he's endorsing this program, but he's a incredible. I've been reading a lot of his books. He's an incredible author, but an incredible psychotherapist here as well. And he's done a tremendous amount of work with veterans. One of the things that he does, fellas, is he actually will take Vietnam veterans and he'll take them on pilgrimages back to Vietnam. And what he's finding is that these men, they go back to Vietnam and they start to be in the country there where they experience so much of their pain, so much of their trauma, and they had been certainly victimized so often by the enemy over there. And they start to see the enemy in a new light, in a very human light. And this actually allows them to start to have that compassion, and it starts to allow them to be free to move forward with this forgiveness process here. How do we identify in our lives where we need to extend forgiveness? I think it goes back to our TFAR cycles. That cycle, the cycles that we have, the thought, feeling, action, and results, right? And the more we can process our emotions and process our thoughts through that TFAR cycle, process our results and our behaviors through that TFAR cycle, we become more self-aware. And when we are doing that processing, perhaps even those thought downloads, and we come up on thoughts of blame or thoughts of condemnation in our lives, or thoughts of holding a grudge, those are the smoking guns indicating that there's likely a place or person or circumstance where we need to apply some forgiveness. And again, the gift that forgiveness is to us is that it takes us from that place of perpetual victimhood and allows us to be that conduit of mercy to somebody else, perhaps even to ourselves. We often got to forgive ourselves here, fellas. Gosh, I knew that when I came home from combat, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can empathize with this, but I was not the best version of myself all the time over in combat. And I certainly didn't make the best decisions. Sometimes the decisions that I made actually cost men their lives. And yeah, like I needed to learn how to forgive myself so that I didn't keep myself in that place of victimhood. And this is difficult, fellas. This is difficult to do. But again, we will not experience this transformation. We will not experience this metamorphosis from the wounded warrior to the warrior redeemed until we can allow that mercy to pour into those places of our depravity, okay? And this comes by way, very often this comes by way of forgiveness. So dive into the worksheets today, and I've got a little exercise in there for you, and it's really just thinking and identifying if there's a person, perhaps even yourself, to whom you need to extend some forgiveness. And as you reflect on the reason why you need to extend some forgiveness there, the next question starts to get into what's the emotion that we have associated with it. And then finally, what would it mean if we were freed? What would it mean to us if we were freed from this emotion or freed from this negative thought that's tied to this particular circumstance that requires a little bit of forgiveness in order for us to be able to move on? Dive in the worksheets, just reflect on it here, fellas, because again, what's the goal? We want to maximize our opportunity to receive this mercy. Why? Because that mercy is that love that allows us, it's that transformative love that allows us to move from this place of victimhood, grow, and then move toward that super unknown goal where we're the greatest version of ourselves. All right, fellas, dive in those worksheets. Continue to persist. And again, return to our exercises from week 1. We're still focusing on that super unknown goal, right? That super unknown goal, that best version of ourselves, that's the great thou shalt, so that we can start persisting in some of these difficult exercises that, like, they're not really comfortable places to go. But when we have that strong purpose that's assigned, that's attached to that super unknown goal here, fellas, that purpose is what drives, it's that fuel to continue to persist and do those things that we don't want to do when we don't want to do them, and do it at 100%. I do what I don't want to do when I don't want to do it at 100%, because that's what winners do. That's what people do. It's one of the things that my coach shares with me. And sometimes I just got to say it. It might sound cheesy here, fellas, but it's one of those things that sometimes I just got to continue to say it. So we continue to persist in those activities and all the exercises that we've learned up to this point here, fellas. Continue to persist on those things. If you persist in these exercises, you will experience the fruits. You will experience the results. And I desire to experience the joy that I've experienced in this program. All right, fellas. See you tomorrow.